So now it's my pleasure to introduce Jose from Andropogan. Thank you very much.
So I thank you all for coming here. And I have to start this introduction by introducing myself and letting you know a little bit about how I came to this podium. I'm Jose Almiñana. I'm a principal with Andropogan Associates. I have personally been tracking the work of this fantastic firm for many years. I've attended regularly to all their presentations. And coming from a firm that is principle-based, where we have a long-term standing in the ethos of the profession, I find a lot of similarities between what this group of talented people are doing and what we're doing. So when the opportunity came up to say to me to be here to introduce them, I jumped at this opportunity. I think you're about to hear some extraordinary work. We've been talking about a little bit of what we want to get out of this conversation. And I'm going to leave it just at that. Let Paul take the helm here, maybe sitting there still. And welcome and have a good time.
I think I'll stand and talk. That way I can move around a little bit. I'm really honored to be here and selected to provide this studio and share the work of our firm. We're going to talk today about the history and kind of my personal background and how this evolved. Also I want to have you hear from some really remarkable people. Marta Kephart, that runs the operations, and Matt Uris, who's our lead landscape architect. Sina, that does a lot of our visionary graphics and wonderful project manager, and Blake Jopling, who's an ecological engineer and does integrated water systems. I think you're going to enjoy kind of the diversity of the background and the work that we do. Pete Walker yesterday had made a statement about how divergent the disciplines are and how interrelated they are, and I often felt like there was this tussle between form and function, and Pete made that statement that as diverse and divergent as these disciplines are, they should all complement and work together. And I think that really embodies the work of Ranna Creek. And to put this into perspective, we all live in one of the most beautiful, scenic places in the world along the coast of Central California. We're there because we love the place. Often people will come and ask for a job at Ranna Creek, and I say, well, certainly don't come here to work for Ranna Creek because you want to work for Ranna Creek. Come here because you love the Monterey and Carmel and Big Sur area, because that's what's going to inspire your work and your creativity, and it certainly does us. I started out some 40 years ago as an artist in Big Sur and happened to meet Dave and Lucille Packard, and that kind of changed my trajectory as a self-taught biologist, a horticulturist, and Dave bought some property in the Elkhorn Slough, one of the largest estuaries on the West Coast, and there were 750,000 metric tons of DDT-laden soil entering the slough every year, and he had the vision, along with building the Monterey Bay Aquarium, of restoring that land. And so I took on that responsibility of building freshwater ponds, saltwater marshes, grew some 12,000 oak trees, 400 cottonwoods, and started a nursery, and then had this interest in native grasses. And that was really the start of the horticultural and the agronomics and the large-scale land use planning we did. As a resource management specialist, I would write plans for grazing management or resource management for open space districts and large land bases in California. All that time I had this interest in ecology, and that's the basis and the background. I wanted to turn over a little overview of the operations and how they work together to Marta. She's going to speak for a minute, and we're going to kind of bounce back and forth. You can get a flavor for our chemistry and how we work on a day-to-day basis. It's complex, it's often spirited, and I think you'll enjoy what we have to share with you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marta. For the last 9 years, I've been running the operations at Ranna Creek. As Paul mentioned, it's fairly dynamic, and our company has about 4 to 5 departments, and we're constantly working together. We're an interdisciplinary firm, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of what that's like on a day-to-day basis. Most days I feel like I'm an air traffic controller. I try to make sure all the planes take off and land safely. And on any given day, I start at 6 a.m. directing our nursery propagation and putting out orders. And we have landscape crews now. We have about 20 to 25 people, up to that many, on crews all over, ranging from Southern California on an 85 articulating boom lift on Sunset Boulevard, planting a living wall, to a restoration crew on a 65-acre dam removal restoration site. So, and in our office, I try to foster a creative environment and really give all these amazing technicians and designers a place where we can really push the envelope and still deliver the project that we're signed up for. One thing that still amazes me to this day is no matter how much planning and forecasting we do, I never know who's going to call us tomorrow. And the projects that we've received really have the ability to transform our lives and allow us to push the envelope and do things that haven't been done before. And I wanted to hand it off to the next person and talk about a few specific projects that mean a lot to us and to our company. In a minute.
There we go. I shared with you a little bit of how we got started in the native grass restoration work, large-scale restoration, and one of the things that we developed were methods and techniques to restore large land units. And we had a native grass seed farm and I went all over the western United States and collected seed for the BLM, for the Forest Service, for post-fire rehabilitation, for revegetation. But there was always something else, and that something else was landscape applications. In the drought-stricken, water-hungry landscapes of California, I developed these grasses for lawn substitutes or for ornamental applications. And this ecological approach, we looked at seasonality and biodiversity. We grew and planted rare and endangered species. And so using natural analogs in the landscape became natural to us. It became what we do. You ask about our process, one of the first things that we do in every one of our proposals is an ecological assessment. We start with that assessment. We want to know about those McCartney layers. What are wind speed and directions, solar gain, slope, aspect, orientation. And these are the things that I learned intuitively from Mickey Munich in Big Sur. And Mickey is an organic architect. He developed and designed the Post Ranch Inn, a real seminal project along the coast. And I had done about 9 of these projects with Mickey. And I said, Mickey, I'm trying to develop these criteria for architects that are, so they can understand about how we can integrate nature, natural process, systems, and functions into the structure, and how we can make that support the building's performance. I said, how do you do it? And Mickey had a twinkle in his eye, and he said, intuition. And it was really brought the whole picture to, for me, it made it compelling and interesting. And as a young artist and a young scientist, I think that's when we really started to create that balance between art and science. And so the work we did, we modeled those ecologies after intact native ecologies and vegetation. And soon the project started to appear. And 25 years ago, and I just can't believe the time has gone by so fast, my friend Bill McDonough called me and said, I want you to imagine you're a migratory bird, and when you fly over the Gap building, you will be home. There was a real reverence there and respect for native species as a part of the built environment. And by the way, this is the highest performing, most sustainable energy building in Bill's portfolio in San Bruno Mountain. I was doing the restoration on San Bruno Mountain and used this as the foundation seed farm, if you will, to grow the foundation seed to take back to San Bruno Mountain. Another interesting aspect of this, when we started to really think about all the functions there, we developed a bioswale on top of this roof with wetland species and gravel beds that would take that stormwater. And at the time, just to give you an indication of how far we've come in design, we took it to the leader and right into the storm drain. And we never do that today. But 25 years later, this is still going strong, and it's really a great project. And as I said, the project started to get bigger. LMN called me in the city of Vancouver, and I worked with Ray Cole and Peter Busby on the sustainability committee, and we said, wouldn't it be cool if you could go into the convention center and there'd be 11 to 24,000 people, like the capacity of this convention center, watering the green roof. And we would divert all that discharge from the sanitary sewer. And so we put anaerobic digesters in the basement, and that's exactly what we did. And this is when that form and function tussle really got real for us. I developed this key line drainage. I'm working with the civils, and they're saying, oh no, they're supposed to be, oriented and exactly 60 feet apart. And I said, well, why don't we look at the slope and the orientation and the water runoffs, and we'll design the leaders and these key line drains so that we can take the surface flows and the underflow and get the water where we want it, and that's into our storage tanks in the basement. And what occurred is we planted those panels in different methods, and it was a great way in which form and function, that art and that science combined and were expressed. And even today, we still work at all these different scales, and we still apply these ecological principles to the smallest of scales. California Academy of Sciences with Renzo Piano, we still enjoy a great working relationship with Renzo. We're growing some 7 acres of tea production on commercial buildings in Hangzhou, China. And working with their team is always really a beautiful experience. And Renzo is known for his transparency and his light and architecture. The California Academy of Sciences had the goal of explaining and exploring the natural world. And they had some 10,000 organisms in the basement in catalogs. And I said, well, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could demonstrate biodiversity and sustainable design and make this as part of the exhibit, the building and the roofs? And Renzo asked me, Paul, can you retain 6 inches of growing media on a curvilinear slip plane in the climate of California? And of course, I walked in and said, okay, yes, we can do that. And developed some interesting mock-ups, full-scale mock-ups and this has been a big part of our practice, since we're often asked to do things that haven't been done before. We always put mock-ups into our program and into our design phases, and we learn so much, and the purpose of these mock-ups are really to look for all the ways they can fail. Mm-hmm. We're not interested in trying to skew these results so that the client can see what great work we do. We're looking for all the things that are left out and all the things that could fail. I tested 29 species of plants. I looked at all the interrelationships between those species and as host plants and insects. Renzo, thinking about amenity and thinking about beauty. I remember he said, Paul, you tell an interesting story, but it has to be beautiful. And I said, okay, well, that ended us with 4 species of plants. So, you know, my theory is about biodiversity, more resilient to what climate, to predatory insects and organisms, and more interstitial relationships, less weeds that can invade. Well, we ended up with 4 species on that. But since then, over the last 8 years, the Academy has planted well over 100 species of plants, and the research that's been done indicate there's 86% greater species abundance on the roof than on the ground plane in the park, and 36% of those species aren't found in the park. So somebody asked me, what good are these little sustainable ecologies within a 500 acre or 500 square mile area? And they're as good as what they're connected to. And this idea of connectivity and looking for adjacent ecologies is really very important to our work. We look at migratory species, we look at hydrology, we look at all those things that can enhance the productivity and the performance of these systems. That's a little bit about who we are. And Marta, you want to
Sure.
take over again?
And you know what, even though I'm a millennial, I'll let you take care of the clicker. Our nursery is my love, and we really have grown it to meet the need of our projects, first off. We are growing a lot of plant material for our living roof and our living wall projects, and now for a lot of our commercial and residential work. And the nursery has always been a site of research and testing where we can really understand the plants that we're trying to grow. And now I would say only 30% of the plants we grow are for our own projects. We are, through our relationships, we've started to offer our contract growing services to a lot of the contractors and landscape architects that we work with, and we're able to provide, which I think is something that's really necessary in the nursery industry, is one grower who can provide all the plants you need on time for a project. And we have a really collaborative approach with, I work with landscape architects other than our team here all day long, and we are constantly troubleshooting plants and trying to deliver plants on a certain schedule and testing new plants. What I see in the industry a lot is all of a sudden one new plant will show up, and within a month everyone's speccing it, and actually nobody's tried it out. It just looked nice in a picture on a catalog, and I love that part. I love introducing new plants to the trade and providing them in large quantities. Some of the challenges we have at the nursery, now that we've gotten to a large size, we're growing on about, 8 acres or so, and we're really doing a lot of volume, maybe 8 million units of plants a year. And all of a sudden, we're not just a side hobby, it's like food, it's perishable, and we're dealing with aphids and funguses, and we're bringing in a lot of researchers from other universities to solve some of these common nursery problems, such as funguses in soil, and we're doing some very interesting testing, and that is the part that's a real passion of mine, and we bring it to the office as well. Right now we're designing a big tower in downtown San Francisco, and we decided to do mock-ups and test out California native plants in an interior environment. And that's the kind of, it might seem little now, but we're going to try to have an entire office building with native indoor plants. And I think that's something really exciting. We started off as a California native plant nursery, and now we're growing all kinds of Mediterranean plants, succulents, and Australian, other drought-tolerant species. And the variety has really come from trying to find a balance of plants that we grow and plant in the landscapes we design. It's been difficult to have a living wall perform with only California native species consistently. And so, you know, even though, especially in our state, there's this, and in our industry, there can be this tendency to want to do only California natives. We also want to have a reality check and provide our clients with a landscape that works, and especially in these built environments that aren't restoration-like projects. Outreach, we love outreach. We love bringing in classrooms and kids and other people who are interested in what we do. And so often on Saturdays or even during the week, we have people coming in, and we talk about native plants and our plants all the time. And I don't know, Paul has led a lot of them.
We call them
do
hay
too.
bale symposia, and we'll invite guest speakers that have a specialization in certain genuses or are interested in watershed health or restoration ecology or landscape applications. And it gives us a chance to share with others our passion and what we do and promote the use of some of these plants for sustainable applications.
Yeah, we're fortunate to be in a community where people are really interested in these things,
Yeah.
and it's right there in front of you all day long. And people, you know, there's always an interest in getting deeper, diving deeper. So we'll have a talk specifically about pollinators, and we just host it at the nursery or at a nearby museum that does a lot of talks. And I think it's really valuable for us. It helps us.
Yeah.
We learn through our own discussions too.
Yeah, and I really enjoy the unconventional approaches as well. I have a young man who's training to be a falconer, and he's using our nursery field to help us with our rodent problem. And I have a lady who's training her rat terrier, and this little dog has gotten thousands of ground squirrels over the last 2 years, and it saves us having to use, you know, traps and other chemical processes, and that's the kind of, you know, ecology that I'm also interested in with that we can control as well.
Now we're going to turn to our design field, and we are really excited to be at the forefront of sustainable design. We're developing carbon positive districts for new hospitals in Denmark. We're working on multi-trophic engineered saltwater, wastewater, aquaponic systems. We're looking at very complex ecological engineering and biofiltration, wetland creation, all within this ecological context. Blake has been leading a lot of that great work, and we're going to start to share with you some of the projects that are on the drawing boards, and then turn our eyes to the future and share with you what we think is really compelling and important going forward.
Thanks, Paul. Let's see if I can make this work.
Yeah, you really have to.
Aim to. Oh,
There you go.
Oh, that's the wrong way.
Wrong way.
This is it's just more examples of what the nursery, having the nursery can do for us, and being able to use it as a testing ground. This is a slide of our install crew doing a living wall. And now we're at recent work. So this project, we're gonna kind of jog through a bunch of projects and talk about the kind of the most interesting and exciting parts for us personally. And this one, I think we're all really love this project. It's a local project, and it's a really massive project. And I think we wanted to demonstrate this project first because it demonstrates our vertical integration. So in this particular site, we went from collecting seed, growing plants, planting the plants. We did the whole design, the irrigation design, the planting design, the whole thing.
Performance standards,
Performance standards.
monitoring programs.
So this dam was built in EPA era. It was built for storing water. It's on the Carmel River. It's about 25 miles east of the coast. That slide that Paul showed at the beginning of the nice beach scene, that would be the outlet of this river. The Carmel River is a critical habitat for steelhead, and that's an endangered species in California, Oregon, Washington. So what happened? This dam became silted in within, I don't know,
3 or 4
15, 20
years.
Yeah,
It was very quick.
Yeah, it was very quickly sedimented. Now, at this point, it had 2.5 million cubic yards of sediment behind the dam, and only, I think, 87% of the water storage was eliminated or displaced by sediment. That is an issue in of itself, but the critical issue was the fact that all that sediment load behind that dam was creating a seismic issue, and the company that owns this dam needed to do something about it. They did some analysis, they looked at different options, and they ultimately decided what they would be the most efficient thing to do would buttress the dam, structurally reinforce it, and call it a day. Fortunately, many organizations realized that there was an opportunity, a huge opportunity here, to do something much bigger. There were, I think, 15 to 20 nonprofits and government organizations that all came together and raised the extra money, which was pretty much doubled the cost of the project. Raised
68.
up to 82
million now.
was the total for the dam removal project. So it happened. It took years and years, and I think we were fortunate not to be involved in all of the machinations of how to figure that all out. But we were a part of a competition to do a design build. So there were bridging documents that were provided, and we, as part of the team, put together this design build bid and got the job. And I think that because we were local, Kleinfelder, they're not local. Granite Construction did the work. They were the lead on the construction. They're local, but I think the fact that we had our nursery in the watershed, that we could provide all of these services right here. I mean, it was just. Other people on the team said that they really thought that our component was critical to getting the project. So here it is now. Dam's down. It's kind of on the big slide. Would be on the right-hand side here, and now you see this is just being completed. We just got completion actually. So the plants are pretty young, as you can see, but it's a 60-acre site. It's amazing, and the most amazing thing is the engineering that took to make this thing happen. So a lot of times dam removals, the biggest impediment to removing a dam is the fact that you have that sediment load that's stacked behind the dam. You take the dam down, what do you do with all that sediment? You truck it out. That's 2.5 million cubic yards. You truck it? No. They say the best thing to do is just let it go. But you can't do that. There's too much liability, especially with some of the most pricey real estate in the country downstream. The opportunity that we had here was that there was a contributing creek that was coming in from a different angle, and it would be able to handle the entire water flow of the creek at this point. So they actually diverted the entire river through making a slot, removing a chunk of mountain really, to be able to make the river meander into this contributing watershed, and then you pretty much leave the sediment in place. All of in the views you see here, there did need to still be some removal of sediment, but it was a tenth of the amount that they would have needed to remove. And what sediment they did remove, they didn't need to truck away. They stabilized it in place. They added it to the pile that was already existing. So then it was our charge to develop planting plans and schemes the seed mixes and everything that would restore the site. So we had 42 acres of upland vegetation, and we had, I think, 10 or 12 riparian acres and wetland areas as well. So yeah, and the other tricky part of this, the challenge for us, is that this is we're on the hook for 5 years to keep this, to maintain it, and we're only done when we've achieved a certain amount of coverage on the site. 30% coverage in 5 years is what we have to achieve. So it's pretty exacting, but I think we're very positive about how it's going. It's been phenomenal so far. And one thing that was a little bit, I'll just move the slides along so we can get some other pictures while I talk. This is
Nature-
it's hard to tell.
nature
but this
took
is
over.
Yeah, this is a challenge slide. After we completed the project, or we were getting close to completion, we started to hear. I'm a weather nerd, and we started to hear about what was going to happen in California this year with El Nino. Largest El Nino, potentially the strongest forces, the most warm water in the Pacific. It didn't actually come to fruition, and we're very thankful for that because it could have been a very big challenge. This was a 1.5-inch storm that came through, and it side cut the river channel, and it's hard to tell when you don't have context, but that's what's happening there.
Those were engineered step pools
Yeah,
for the steelhead to migrate and resting pools on their way upstream.
Yeah, and most of it remained intact, but it did wash out a whole chunk, so that had to get fixed. And I think as the plants have stabilized, the whole system has stabilized. Here's a slide of the dam scar. I love this. It was interesting that they chose to leave the dam scar. I'm glad they did. It was sort of controversial, but I liked the reminder of what was. This is a good shot of the step pools before the vegetation is grown in, just allowing the salmon to come in and rest in the pools and move up. Nice panoramic of it. So now I'll turn it over to Matt, and he'll talk about living walls.
We're going to talk more about our living architecture projects and some of the opportunities we see and challenges.
Yeah, this is, before I get down into this project too much, I just want to say that, Paul mentioned a little bit, our firm is a little bit different than most firms here. Paul's an ecologist and an artist, and Marta's background is in plant material, and I'm a licensed landscape architect, and we have a group of designers and landscape architects, and we also have ecologists and a lot of other people in the company. So it's a little different approach. We don't have that principle, as Jose mentioned, the principle kind of down. We have Paul with a different look at things. So I think we approach a lot of our projects differently, and this was one of them. This is the final picture of the project, and it was a project we worked with Rios Clemente Hale on. They kind of came up with the overall design of it, and they came to us to figure out how to
I actually
how to
got a
grow all
phone
these
call at the
plants, yeah.
nursery, and they said, we're thinking about a living wall. Do you have any ideas for a plant list? And right away I took it up to Matt and Paul, and this is what it turned out to look like.
So we helped them, we developed the plant list with their input, and then we developed the entire system to hang this thing off of the side of the building. Each one of those strips is about a 3.5-foot wide steel basket that's 6 feet tall and about 5 inches thick. So we helped develop the system with the structural engineers and the installers of that steel infrastructure to hang these baskets on the side of the building. We did a mock-up more for plant material and for the client to kind of see what it was going to look like on the left side. And then the structural steel people came in, started hanging all the steel off the side of the building, and then we began planning it. Here's our crews on 4 booms. The tallest boom is about 85 feet up off Hollywood Boulevard, or Sunset Boulevard.
This is about the time when I was here looking up, I said, oh, what have I done now?
There were definitely challenges.
We're right on, the highest profile, highest risk, Sunset Boulevard. And then I looked up, and it was the day after we planted, and the hummingbirds were there. And I thought,
Yeah.
that's why we're here.
Yeah, and this was, this structure, the architects wanted to keep it very lightweight looking, so we had to find an incredibly lightweight soil blend that would support plant growth, drain very well for the few storms that Los Angeles gets in a year. They can be pretty intense at times, and develop something that was going to support our plant material. And work with our construction crew. These are all guys that work for Ranna Creek. They were working 10 to 12-hour days for about
6 days a week.
6 days a week. So that's kind of what it looked like after everything had grown in. And we're still currently maintaining it. And the client says, can we change the color of this plant material over here? So we'll go in and tear out some plants and put something else in. And a real interesting part of this project is the water story also. And Blake worked a lot on that, so I'm going to turn it back over to Blake and
Sure, yeah.
talk a little bit about water.
Yeah, when Paul and I visited the site, the architects that we were doing the site visit with mentioned that there was some water that might be available that would be non-potable. They were vague, and they weren't even 100% sure what that looked like. We were in the basement checking out where we'd be putting controllers and equipment, and this pipe you could hear just hanging from the ceiling, just
Running
it was
water.
like a 6-inch pipe just gushing water. And we're like, where is that coming from? And we got the records, and the building manager provided all the records, and it was 8,000 gallons a day of dewatering water from the basement. So we're like, well, what can we do this? And they had an NPDES permit to dump the water. And that kind of raised a red flag for us. It's like, oh, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's very likely that we could modify the NPDES permit in order to actually use it. We looked through the water scans and the data. It was super clean.
It's probably the cleanest water in the LA basin.
Yeah. Well, there's just an underground river down that just running underground there. So we looked into it. We wrote a letter to I made some phone calls and wrote a letter to NPDES. They said, absolutely. For beneficial use, that is one of the criteria that we look at when we evaluate whether a modification to the permit can be made.
And I think it's really interesting that the project probably wouldn't be possible without that water.
Yeah.
Because
doubt.
with that lightweight soil, it drains so quickly that we're irrigating through an automated system 2 or 3 times a day, depending on season. And they had people that were driving down the street as it was going in, tweeting to the client that
And-
this is terrible. How could you be using all this water in Los Angeles
We're
in
in
a
a
desert?
drought.
We became the joke of the comedy club. Dane Cook had his Twitter account lit up about the waste of water, and it's a really great story because it demonstrates that we don't. If we look at other sources, whether it's gray water, black water, which we'll show you some of those examples, cooling tower blowdown, and I think this mining these basements. I've been to so many of these seminars with architects, and one of the biggest problems in California are these expansive clay soils and concrete cracks, and almost all these basements have sumps. And I thought, there's our water. Let's just get it there. And this was a great example how we had a zero potable water application in the entire landscape. I think we got to roll because we have a lot to share with
We
you.
have a lot to share, so I'm going to have to go fast here. The island of Lanai was another project that we worked on, and we were engaged to do a sustainability master plan, and this was right after the island was purchased by the CEO of Oracle, Larry Ellison, and he wanted to take this as a case study of sustainability that could be applied worldwide. Lanai, the island itself, is this guy here, and he's in the rain shadow of Maui. So it's a very dry island. You can kind of see that from this. There's 2 resorts on the island. This is one of them, and there's not really much. It's mostly flat land. There's very steep coastlines, but you see kind of the basin there. It's all very flat. It was all pineapple fields I think 75% of the land coverage.
26,000 acres of toxic, destroyed landscape
Have you ever
as
seen
a
a
result of
Have you
the
ever seen
pineapple.
a
Bidole.
strawberry field that's kind of like
Bidole.
that? There's nematodes, parasitic nematodes in the soil. They have to cover with plastic. They use drip tubing underneath it, but instead of cleaning that up after they're done with the crop, they just took the tractor and disked
Yeah,
it in.
let's show them.
So it's just, this kind of shows the island and that basin. The basin where most of the pineapple growing is in here, but they really tried to find every single place that they could grow the pineapple. And I mean, the land practices were terrible. It was very disturbing to see it firsthand. I mean, and the mass wasting, the amount of erosion, which I'll get into shortly, it was terrible. There's so much. We flew in one time right after a storm, and the ocean all around the island was just reddish brown for miles out.
Yeah, it's destroyed the fishing ponds that were built by the indigenous peoples. The
The coral
fishery is in
reefs.
collapse, the reefs, and it's many factors, the farming, but also the introduction of a deer.
Yeah. So the hydrologic story here is critical to understand, and it is very complex. But I'll try to get to the crux of it. So 40% of the water that ends up on the island is actually coming from fog. The Lanai Hale, the little peak there, is the clouds that pass over and condense over the Hale fog drip, and there's vegetation up there on the top that is adapted to collect that water. But there are 16 to 30,000 invasive axis deer on the island, and they love munching on all of those ferns and things that catch the water. So that's just that's really where the erosion is terrible and what's happening there. So beyond master planning, we were asked to do a couple initiatives, because the master plan at this early stage became so hard to track. I mean, we did as best we could, but we came back to the client and said, you have these requests for these specific projects within this master plan. How do we rectify? How do we get all this going? And what that turned out to be was a couple of very specific initiatives. One would be to reduce the deer populations in a way that would actually provide value-added product for the island and food, and as a food source for the island. The slide on your left is just an example of the terrible erosion around the edges of the coastline, and those are the little guys that we wanted to
And
destroy.
if I can just interject, I think the issue of the deer is incredible. We were looking at herds of 600 deer in one herd. I think there was a population of over 30,000 axis deer, all in introduced species, that were just wreaking havoc on a tiny island environment.
Yeah, and still are. So management of the deer was one of the initiatives and what we looked at. I mean, this is not landscape architecture, but we got ourselves in this this position where we had to figure this out. They wanted us to take the lead. And so we looked at, we talked to the FDA, we talked to the different agencies, we talked to the agricultural extension, which was hugely helpful. We had a symposium with them, and they provided a lot of support and background and made the right connections so that we could develop a plan to have a mobile abattoir that would, and a mobile truck, the refrigerated truck. So the refrigerated truck drives around with the hunters, and they take down the deer in a humane way that's certified by FDA, and hang them up in that little pickup truck, and then roll them on later after the night of hunting. Roll them onto that big van, and the entire breakdown process happens there. And what do you get at the end is delicious meat that could be sold on the island or served at the restaurants, and reduce erosion eventually.
I want to interject here for a minute. I know we've got a short period of time, so we'll try to move through this quickly.
The other, the island mainly wanted to be totally sustainable from a food production standpoint. So one of those concepts was to go look back to historical agriculture on the island, which had a lot to do with agriculture, aquaculture, growing taro, and creating a system where you are using the fish, the poop, and the non-consumed food to provide nutrients for the taro fields. So we looked into that, and we worked with the agricultural extension to develop a system that kind of does that and this was, the idea is that this is growing all the greens for the restaurants and will be growing, and this would be replicable and expandable. And
The idea here is we would not only grow fresh vegetables, but also indigenous species for revegetation. And the metrics here are interesting. There wasn't any financial gain in the fish. It was all in. Yes, it was the payback. The ROI was in the fresh food. About $41,000 an acre to the farmers that could participate.
And this was critical on an island where 99% of the food was imported.
we took it a little further with some big idea thinking on how we could take more of the waste stream on the island and apply it to how we could do more. We're accessing a lot of research that the University of Hawaii was putting together, but that's just kind of dreaming.
Bill
Next one.
Bill McDonough's project in Alta Sea, again, one of those multi-trophic engineering, ecological engineering projects, and also looking at adaptive reuse of a historic warehouse and creating a new research facility for 7 campuses in the LA Basin. And
20 campuses.
we had the mandate of developing a zero runoff site and high event rainfalls near shore. And our goal, thinking along the lines of Bill McDonough, was to do more good. So not just get to zero or zero runoff, but what could we do with the water, the wastewater and the stormwater?
This is a mile-long pier in San Pedro. Most of that building is an existing building. And it's pretty much where all the bananas were at one time housed and ripened before they shipped out to the rest of the country. So this whole thing is designed to be a world-class aquarium where people can go and visit and learn about the aquatic life, but also intensive research. All these different schools would be researching here. And what we really focused in on was the water system and how we could take advantage of the nutrient stream from the aquariums and from the rich seawater that was right there being pulled in. The seawater system would be a 2 million gallon a day system. So there was just a ton of nutrients that could come through that. And we evaluated whether we would use freshwater marshes or saltwater marshes and integrate them into the landscape. It was a really fun project, master plan level, but really fun to try to figure all this stuff out and work closely with the seawater engineer on how this all could potentially work. These are some diagrams that describe the different ways that we would be entraining those nutrients. We talked about growing mussels on lines, and what was really interesting is that talking to the researchers, we had a meeting on site with them, and the researchers got really excited about the wetland opportunities, and all of a sudden the program changed. It's like, okay, well, part of this will be demonstration, but a lot of this is actually going to be research, little opportunities for research. So that was a really cool thing that came out of that. More conceptual ideas about how the space would be laid out.
Yeah, I'll just go real quick through this. Just finished a 9-year project with Ken Smith Workshop and Grimshaw and the Bronx, and the big idea here was to take a 3-story hole in the ground that's treating 35 to 40% of the drinking water for Manhattan and integrate it with the existing Gulf program of Van Cortlandt Park, and also entrain all the stormwater and the runoff from the living roof in a circular wetland treatment cells that go around the perimeter, not only to provide the wetland and water treatments, but also to create a secure area so that people don't have access to the plenums on either side. Those are the big vents. And this has been a very complex project and a large-scale project, and we also, when we got into the excavation, found 4 artesian wells that contributed about 55 gallons a minute with some very high levels of chromium in the water. And so the wetland cells also, we changed the residency time, the treatment type, and isolation cells in order to clean and purify that water. It was material intensive, and some of these projects can be one of the hardest things about a project of this scale, I learned, is the schedule and the time it really can hurt your implementation. This is the project today, and it's not yet done. There's another phase. There's the green roofs on the ARB plant. That's the chemical plant that takes those chemicals for the water treatment. And we'll go real quick through this project.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll, this is the 3M. Blake calls it, it's not the 3 million.
The 3M is 3 million pounds of steel that they plan on making annually at the plant. It's a huge plant in Saltillo, Mexico. And but we kind of changed it to 3M, meaning 3 million cubic meters of soil that were moved in order to build the project. It has rail lines that go in. That's the steel being made. The runoff from the rainfall, the civil engineering was just put it in a concrete trench and let it fly.
There's absolutely no regulation about this contaminated water with heavy metals. Just run it to the nearest arroyo where there's these ancient villages that are pretty much goat herders, and they're living very poorly on the landscape. And so we talked them into considering treating all that on site, and the big idea was these pools that occur naturally, and looking at that ecology as the water treatment scheme. And we also did the landscape for the headquarters, but used zero potable water. This is all treated wastewater, black water. These are pretty much off the shelf. There's no big fear and loathing about using these open composting wastewater applications there, and created these nice little oases in the desert for the project. Sina, I want him to speak because he's been really instrumental in a lot of the vision and illustrations for our projects, and how we take complex ideas about enhancing building performance with landscape and vegetation and ecology. And then we'll get into some questions and discussions.
So, first of all, my name is Sina. One of the reasons I haven't spoken very much today is because I'm one of the most recent members of our team. I've only been working at Ranna Creek for 3 years after receiving my MLA at Cal Poly Pomona. And one of the reasons that we decided that would be good for me to be part of this discussion was to give the perspective of someone who is more recent to the profession and who is still kind of learning as I go, and seeing some faces in the crowd. I think that that was probably a good idea, because it has been being part of Ranna Creek has been a wonderful experience for me to learn from some of the projects that we've gone over. This was a project in Dubai. It's the Al Maktoum International Airport, and we were brought on specifically to help them with their sustainability plan. So our scope was limited more to systems planning and graphic communication more so than design. But still, it was a really wonderful experience to kind of build on our skill set and on kind of the pool of knowledge that we've gained through some of the projects that Blake described, specifically Lanai, we ended up incorporating many of the same ideas that we had worked on Alta Sea and Lanai into this project. And for me, it was a great opportunity to learn from those projects that had come before I joined the firm, and to kind of like, you know, pass that knowledge on to a new member such as myself. So for this project, there were 4 different components. There was the entry plaza, which the main purpose of was to provide an agricultural kind of sustainable source of food, and also to block wind and sand from the surrounding desert. The concourse landscape, an interior oasis, which was basically a heavily conditioned, almost like greenhouse type space, and exterior gardens, which were similar to the entry plaza. The concourse landscape was supposed to be a subset of the species that you would find in the interior oasis, which was intended to be a much more rich, lush landscape. There were a few challenges in this project, and one of them was that we didn't really control the design. That wasn't part of our scope. And you know, we were trying to kind of figure out what the architects wanted without actually being able to propose, you know, specific design ideas. So as much as possible, we tried to give them a framework for making decisions and giving them a sense of what the options were. This kind of shows the interior oases, and this graphic kind of shows the entire system at work. Another challenge with this project was just adapting to the architect's style. We worked with Perkins and Will, and they were very talented people. I learned a lot from them and from this project. But, you know, for example, they had this specific graphic style where they wanted to kind of show everything in one graphic, and it was kind of difficult to adapt to that just personally. But I think the nice thing about this graphic is it shows how complex this project was and how interconnected everything was. So for example, on the far left, you have the productive landscape providing food to the airport, and also compost, or rather landscape waste that is then fed into an anaerobic digester. That in turn produces compost, which goes back to the exterior landscape. And then you have connections between the interior landscape and the exterior gardens. Like, so you have air humidifiers and cooling towers, and the water going from the cooling tower wastewater to the constructed wetland in the exterior gardens. So there's just a lot of stuff working together, and in terms of the productive landscape, we really looked at the history of the region, the cultural landscapes that you would find in the Arabian Peninsula, and we were really drawn to the ideas of intercropping, of using native species that have deep root systems and can, you know, access water deep in the ground, and of also using these traditional irrigation channels called filage, which in our case we thought would maybe not be so much used for irrigation, but maybe used to like flush out salts that came from drip irrigation periodically. So we were really trying to use as much old ideas and cultural traditions in our design as possible. I think one challenge with that, though, was that as landscape architects, we're often, I think, inherently drawn to place and to history and to what has come before. And I think for me specifically, it's always challenging to kind of push the boundary and tear myself away from, you know, tradition and culture, and kind of envision new possibilities. So this was a good exercise in doing that, and not just, you know, trying to recreate a cultural landscape, but also trying to see how that could be adapted to, you know, this specific setting. So the exterior gardens were more intended to be, as I said, low resource landscapes. So we looked at some of the existing landscape typologies in the region. This graphic shows our attempt to communicate to the client and to the architects how different landscape typologies could offer different benefits. And you could have a more resource-intensive landscape that had more system integration potential, or a less resource-intensive landscape that didn't have as much potential for system integration. This is kind of what that landscape, exterior landscape, might have eventually ended up looking like. One of the drawbacks of this project was that we never had an opportunity to visit the site, and oftentimes we were designing from images and PDFs and kind of trying to imagine what these places would look like. Years later, I did have a chance to visit the site, or not the site, the region on my own, and it was really interesting to see these plants and these landscapes that I had, read about and studied, and I really felt like I had entered this project, and it was interesting to kind of figure out that we were on the right track in many ways. The interior gardens were intended to be much more lush. We looked at a number of different biomes from across the world. And since this is an international space, we really wanted to pull as much from these different biomes so that we could create a truly international interior landscape. Again, we tried to communicate to them the different benefits of each biome typology in terms of system integration and resource use. And we did the same with the potential for using gray water and even black water in a constructed wetland. There's several different types of constructed wetland, and we just try to synthesize the information as much as possible in an easy to understand manner so that they could make decisions about exactly what they wanted. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, what's next? I think that you can see the broad depth of applications in our work and our passion and love for the work and history of the company. And I was really happy you all got to hear from these remarkable people today. I have the great pleasure of being with every single day. And I think one of the things that really sets our small firm apart is the love of what we do, and then how well we get along with each other. There's couples, there's generations, there's father, son, mother, daughters. We're a big family, and we are really dedicated to the work. We see great opportunities in the future. We're positive about the direction that the profession is heading and the integration of landscape and landscape ecology, restoration ecology into the work we do. And we want to hear from you now. We want to get the discussion going and listen about what you're doing and what excites you, and answer any questions we can about the work you've seen and work that we have coming up. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been a great pleasure.
I'm sure everybody has a few questions in their mind. If you can go up to the microphone and we can all hear you. Thank you.
Paul, you spoke in detail about the biodiversity that was and then wasn't and then was again on the California Academy of Sciences. Was there any attempt made to deal with the biodiversity of the microbiota in the substrate? In other words, was there any thought about what kinds of microbes would be placed in that?
Well, you just asked a really controversial question, and one that didn't turn out so well. And the original specifications included earthworms and organic standards and no nitrate fertilizers. And here's where I'm going to be a little bit critical, and maybe I don't want to sound mean, but I wasn't the landscape architect on the project. And for some unknown reason, the landscape architects accepted a medium that didn't meet the specifications, and it had urea in it. And many of the plants died immediately. And so those are the kinds of things that happen, and especially when you're doing the kind of work we do, and it's not something that, but on projects we do, we've learned from that, and I think that's been something we watch out for now as to how we can maintain the integrity of and the intention all the way through. So we get those standards all the way through.
From my perspective too, I think that world is opening up to us more and more. I think we're just on the edge. Like, we always specify mycorrhizal inoculants, which is critical, especially for the native plants. But we don't know that much about what's happening in the soil bio, especially on the green roof and the temperature fluctuations and those types of things. But
Yeah, and we use mycorrhizal fungi in our soil media at the nursery as well, so we at least give the plants a good start.
One of the things we're facing now in the California flora nursery business is there's been a new Phytophthora tenticulata that's been introduced.
From Spain.
And it has a devastating effect on our chaparral species. Just like sudden oak death, it kills these plants immediately. We've just engaged with the University of California, and there are some new inoculums that have been developed that are not fungicides, that are mycorrhizal based, that show promise in complete control of a broad spectrum of phytophthora. And I think what you've touched on, Richard, is just how important our soil is. That's where our carbon is, that's where our life is, and so often we forget that either on structure or off, that's really an important topic.
Yeah, my question sort of relates to that. And past couple of years, there's been some discussion among the habitat restoration industry in Northern California about these pathogens, San Francisco PUC projects, Santa Clara Valley Water District projects. So the discussion has been with the contract growers. I mean, haven't even approached commercial nurseries yet, but and we're testing many of the contract growers, and few of them are free of these pathogens in their growing operations. And so my question is, and I'm not familiar with the inoculum that you're talking about, whether that's a way of trying to clean up a habitat after it's been infested, but your nursery operation, do you follow clean nursery practices? Is this an issue that you're aware of? Do you find that your clients are beginning to spec for clean plants, clean plant material?
Yes, for the last 2 years, we've worked closely with the CDFA, and we've implemented a lot of their best management practices. For example, most of my nursery, I've switched completely from overhead watering for my small species, and we employ 4 full-time irrigators, and we're hand watering almost everything that is in a small container. We we elevate most of our small plants. We found that most of the fungus is spread through spraying water that sprays onto the leaves and then onto the soil. So everything is elevated at least 2 or 3 feet off the ground. We're working a lot with soil control labs. We test our plants. And sometimes that's, for example, for our San Clemente dam restoration project, almost every single species of plants was tested before it was released to go on site. So it's made our industry a lot more accountable, and we come at it now from a much more protective standpoint. Now that we're aware of the dangers of the phytophthora. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it did. I'm glad that you're aware of it. There's few contract growers, for instance, that are aware of it, and it's a big education problem.
Yeah, you know,
We've seen a lot of specs that are, a lot of our specs say, pest and disease free. Just kind of broad brush, blanket of what, and so I think it kind of is up to the specifier to be able to understand what's out there and be able to, require more specific testing.
You can sure imagine the paranoia for small and commercial nurseries. And they're not really interested in cooperation because they're protecting their livelihoods. These detections of pathogens can end up in complete quarantine and the complete destruction of the crops, given that the margins are so small in the industry. One cycle of destroying your entire crop and not fulfilling contracts can put you out of business. And what we did is we became very proactive and wanted to provide a leadership position and cooperated with the agencies, worked on the specs, developed the best management practices in concert with those agencies that are regulating the spread of pathogens. And I would say one of the things in this living architecture business that's really problematic is that now we're importing plants from globally, and we have the opportunity now to spread these plant diseases and organisms much more readily than we had historically. So it's a real controversy, it's a real challenge to the plant material industry, and I think as landscape architects, you'll start to see more and more information about the control of pathogens and disease and organisms and materials. So thanks
Glad to
for
hear
that
you're aware of
question.
it.
It's a big topic, and it's really important, but some of the research coming out, these soil-based inoculums, you just add it to the bulk, mix it into the growing medias, and it's shown real promise for many species of Phytophthora that were problematic, and the ornamental trade as well.
Thank you. I have a more general, a little philosophical question about, in this business, there's a continuum of tools that you can use, from a very chemically intensive herbicides and pesticides to a completely organic approach, and also practices that go along with that, from herbicide weeding versus hand weeding versus grazing. And so I'm imagining that you kind of work pretty much across that continuum, but I'm interested to hear that and how you do that, and how do you negotiate with clients if you might want to push them in one direction or the other in terms of which tools to use, and maybe a little bit of the ethical questions about how do you make those decisions on a project-by-project basis?
Well, we don't want to poison the land, and that's our ethic. We start there every time with integrated pest management, organic standards. We find that the healthier and more biodiverse and stable the communities we create, the more resilient they are to those kinds of problems. And we also recognize that when those chemical treatments are used, it exacerbates the problem. I worked with Burlington Northern on their 32,000 linear miles of monarch butterfly restoration potential, looking at how they could take some $37 million worth of Roundup a year and convert it to prairie habitat that was more stable and more diverse. And I simply showed the financial argument that, gee, every time you use those chemicals and bare the soil, you're creating the opportunity to continue that kind of ecology, which is undesirable and fire-prone species. So that's our philosophy and our approach. And I practice the Santa Claus herbicide, ho, ho, ho. So, yeah, we're trying to push those organic standards when we
One thing that we try to do on a lot of projects is also develop maintenance criteria for the landscapes. So setting out whether it's hoeing or weed pulling, and actually, especially on our living roofs, identify what a lot of the problem weeds might be, so the maintenance crew actually is pulling out the right plants as opposed to a native grass or something that we might have planted on the roof. So that's part of our approach also.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jerry Smith. I work primarily in healthcare and was interested in how you mentioned you were working in hospitals in Denmark, I believe it was. And of course, the problem that we have is certainly with our infection control folks who, regardless of the research that we provide of showing the health benefits of integrating nature to the healing process, especially within these facilities, the infection control is such a serious situation.
And it's not working, is it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, probably the worst place you can go to get an infection is in a
right.
hospital.
So maybe you can share with us what you've learned and how you're addressing that.
Well, one of the things that we've done several hospital projects, and this new one coming up has promised to have some of our ideas integrated into the ground plane, the landscape, and the roof. You know, we're not talking about incurring interior gardens with soils and plants, but we want to have gardens and landscapes that are healthy. So we want to take care of them in a healthy way. We want to have landscapes and gardens that are productive. And one of the ways we see the benefit to the healthcare industry is why couldn't we provide many of the species of plants, whether they're aromatic or medicinal or ornamental, cut flowers, that is a little more sustainable, that we're not cutting flowers in South Africa and then shipping them, north and packaging them and putting them in your hospital room. We could do all those things as a part of the landscape around the vegetation of the roof. So that's kind of our approach and what we've proposed. And we get a little bit at a time. We get some of these ideas that could be implemented. But this next one really has a lot of open space around it, and we see it as a kind of financial generator as well, to take care of the soil, restore the habitat, and encourage more medicinal plants that could be used by the hospital in those landscapes, and not just the biophilia benefits, the healthy benefits from the seeing and experiencing the vegetation.
On the other side of that coin, I'd say Oshpod is a really hard nut to crack. We have not been very successful in trying to push the envelope on any interior spaces. We've tried a lot of different things, and part of it is not having, our dialogue is limited because we're working through the architect, or there's a lot of different elements between us and that agency. But
the best we can do are courtyards that are isolated. That's a great place for those heroes and warriors that are in that very intense environment to get out and have a garden they can enjoy. Or there's a lot of grieving and trauma and tragedy that happens too, so we want to create those kind of places that people could get away for refuge.
Yeah, I think the key is how green roof terraces are integrated into the architecture. Mm-hmm. Are they seamless with the windows so that it feels like a real extension of a garden, rather than I'm a stormwater retention element that's off tucked away somewhere, which you see sometimes, and that play is important.
Yeah, good questions.
I got a couple of questions.
Great.
First, I'd like to make a comment and a follow-up to Jerry's line of questioning, because I think what is happening in the health industry, and part of the reasons why we can be more effective, is that because the kinds of things that we can contribute to are never part of the program of a hospital. So if we find ourselves at the table when the hospital leadership is deciding how the hospital is going to happen, and you're in a position to talk to the clinical staff, and you begin to bring about the kinds of tools that are available to them when you actually think about exterior spaces as part of the healing process in the hospital, I think that the conversation will yield vast different results. And then there will be research and other things done so we can get plants inside of the building and do all those things which are now being seen as a burden and something that people cannot get their ROI, which is nothing could be further away from that, right? So biophilia is as far as we can get to it with forest bathing and endorphin production and all those things. But, you know, one step at a time and we'll get there. I wanted to ask you all about something that is about your practice and the fact that you have the capacity to grow your own plant material. And you at times are potentially invited to have design-build contracts. And the inherent, if not, you don't need to answer that, but there is, I find ourselves in these situations in having a potential conflict of interest in that we are specifying our own materials. We are exposed to a different kind of liability that that it has to be part of the financial aspect of the business, a business that I'm sure supports a multitude of families, and you have to be very conscious about that. So I think it's something that we never get to talk to in these conversations, and your practice is so extraordinary and unique in this regard that I think I will welcome a little bit of a conversation on that regard.
I just want to add something to that or comment. I think, you know, being in charge of the landscape architecture department, we try to write our specifications for all of our projects, whether it's a project that we might build ourselves or a project we're working on with, you know, Renzo Piano in China or something. It's always something that we have in mind is to make the specs as strict and as straightforward with submittals and all those types of things that you would have on any other project. So it's not something that we usually try to bypass if we're going to build it ourselves. And you know, working with the construction department, making sure that we do get a submittal and that our designers are involved in the process to make sure that it's being carried out the way it was designed.
You know, on private projects where it's privately funded, there's no conflict whatsoever. And but at the same, having said that, when we finish a design, we create those specifications so they could be bid. And the client then can go out and tender 3 bids if they'd like to, and they can evaluate ours if we're interested in building it. So I have to say, we don't just go after every single job, and we don't compete well, actually, in the bidding process, but where we perform well are on these kinds of projects that you've seen that are, whether they're challenging or high risk or haven't been done before or complicated or have a great interest to us from the local ecological standpoint. That's when we like to combine them. On public projects, we completely separate the two. If we do a design that goes out for tender, we're not going to bid on it. We often will offer a statement of conflict if there is one. So that's, and then managing risk, well, Marta and I live with that every evening. And it's quite significant when we're considering specifying the kinds of things that we do on emerging technologies in ways that haven't been applied before, and traditional practice or applications. And so a part of our work is education as well, and research. And we spend a great deal of time on research. But having said that, I often walk into the design office with another idea, and I think I've learned from having made little mistakes or overreaching that I rely on the people that work at Ranna Creek now to make those final decisions because often I'll put the team at risk, and they are now pushing back and saying, I don't know, Paul, are you sure you want to do that? And so I think that's part of the joy, but part of the, without stretching the envelope and trying these things, we're not going to get there. We need to learn what's possible.
I would agree with Paul. He pushes us, and then we have to push back. I mean, and that's something that was unique to our work environment, and some are more comfortable with that than others, but you kind of have to at some point, and it really, like Paul mentioned before, it is this open dialogue that we have, which I value.
Sometimes
I think
it's
great.
really spirited too.
Yeah, we argue.
Yeah, oftentimes, Matt and I will look at each other after an idea that Paul has committed us to, and we say, okay, let's figure out how to make this work. And I think part of that process too, it's been really rewarding for me in particular to see a project go from the initial design phase and to have our client engage us in a further construction and contract growth process, and to be able to stand there at the end of that completed process and have a really happy client who wants to continue engaging us to maintain the project. And I think that's the process that we learn a lot from. And that really has been a joy for me personally.
We have about 4 more minutes, and we really appreciate all your good questions. Thank you.
Okay. My name's Eleanor McKinney. I'm from Austin, Texas. And I was curious on the design build part about the timing issue, because construction schedules change. And so, you've set up in the nursery to have something ready to go by a certain time, and then that time changes. And how do you deal with that?
Well, that's part of our wholesale component. I try to offload the plants that are delayed. And so we factor in contingency into everything we grow. But a lot of the time, it's not uncommon for us to have 1 month to 6 month delays. It's absolutely normal. And that is why it has been really great for us to expand our offerings and push about 70% of our material into the trade, so that our client isn't on the hook for the material, which is usually what happens in the industry trade. If you're delayed, it's the client who has to carry the brunt of the costs, and we try to be as fair as possible and work on other creative ways to get the material out of the nursery.
Yeah, we have a project currently for PG&E in San Francisco with 2 living roofs that we've been growing plants for, and it's been delayed 3
Over a
or 4 times, and and these are 4-inch pots, so those get bumped up and are sold off to different clients, and Marta starts growing another crop, and it's kind of a battle.
With the San Clemente project, that was a unique one because we had a lot. I mean, we had 1,000 pounds of seed. We had a lot of different container plantings, and we were emphatic about planting timing. We needed to plant in the fall, but the construction schedule kept changing on us, and the delays, and at some point they were looking to us to plant all our material and do all of our seeding in the summertime. And we had a contingency for temporary irrigation and all that, but that would increase our labor costs by an insane amount. And there was, luckily, we were able to put it all down right in the right time, but there was a moment there where we didn't feel like we had a lot of, we weren't armed with with a good argument for how we, per spec, or what could we reference for the schedule change, and I was fortunate that it didn't go a different way.
We have time for just one more question.
I have a quick question, and this is concerning the living wall, and that was really quite a project. Each time I see a living wall, my mind immediately goes to the excessive, possibly potable water use. And so as much as I admire them, I'm not as excited about them for that reason. So it sounds as though, to me, and this is an assumption on my part, correct me if I'm wrong, that you were into the project when you discovered the discharge
Yes.
water that you were able to tap into. What if you hadn't that source, that
We had-
water source?
We had stormwater.
Then what?
We had stormwater in
Captured
the
stormwater.
design from the,
And that could have been sufficient for
what was the,
this project in that
We would
area?
have changed our planting palette, I would
Yeah.
think. I mean, we might have a succulent wall.
Uh-huh.
And I think that would have been fine. It just
I
would
think
have,
we were-
wouldn't have met maybe some of the criteria that the owner was looking for, but I don't think we
what
would
was
have.
it, 37 to 50% reduction in potable water?
With storm.
Yeah, with
Yeah,
storm.
if we'd
And
done the
then all of a
storm.
sudden, we had the gift, and that changed. That's a great question.
Great.
Yeah.
You know, Marta and I built a living wall, one of these high-profile felt walls, and it was really awful for us because we had a constructed wetland and a closed-loop system and entrained the water through our living roof and this fairly internationally known living wall designer's work. And it had got VE'd out. And yet we were on the hook to construct it, which is kind of against our principles. And even to this day, it pumps 90 pounds of nitrates and phosphates into the stormwater and runs an irrigation 24/7, whether it's raining or not. So those are some of the lessons learned and it drives our work. You know, we want to advance the ecology. And today I asked, why Ranna Creek? Why were we selected to speak? And last year, some of the folks from the office came out and presented some of their work, and there was a survey done, and the resounding answer was, we want to hear more about sustainable and ecological design. So I hope we accomplish that. And we really thank you all for being here today. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for the answer.
One more recognition, the artwork you see there. Emily's a very creative artist and has
They're artist in residence
done a
here.
lot of fine work for us. So thanks again for coming.